Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and Agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. First, there was the promise of big data solving many of our business challenges, yet now here we are, flooded with data, and many businesses are having a hard time knowing what to prioritize and which data to pay attention to. Today, we're going to talk about prioritizing the right data and signals to make a meaningful impact on your business. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Prasanna Dhungel, managing partner at GrowByData. Prasanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. It's such a great honor to be here and talk about this topic here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So why don't we get started by you giving a little background on yourself and also what GrowByData does?
Sure. So I am a trained engineer and MBA that started in the data space almost like 2 decades ago. After undergrad, grad school, I worked in the telecom space, and studied a lot of data back in grad school. And this is like in the early days of wireless communication. And, after that experience, I started working in a very early stage healthcare data company that was using, insurance data, pharmacy data to, in fact, create insights to help people, help patients, help hospitals. So that was a very novel, fulfilling type of an experience. I went to business school, and in the early part of last decade, as you noted, everyone was talking about big data, and that was the whole movement. And I feel we moved from a data scarce society to a big data society.
Yeah.
And at least, that's what the industry was trying to have us do. And then over the last 10 years, I say that we have evolved to a data overwhelmed society. And what we do, and I started GrowByData, in the early days of big data 9 years ago. And we did this to bring data insights to a lot of small to mid-sized businesses that were going into e-commerce. And we stayed on that, for a few years. And then we help companies, across verticals, especially in retail, really capitalize and move on Amazon and Walmart, get their products listed on e-commerce. And then, with all of that, then questions around intelligence started to come. What price should I be selling it? And am I visible? What should my promotions be looking like? And so today, we've evolved to providing insights, marketing insights to large enterprises, mid-sized enterprises, agencies on what share of voice, what's my pricing look like, what's my promotion should be, what are categories that have opportunities, what are geographies where I should go. It's all these types of questions. That's where we evolved to. And my current thesis, on this topic is, I really try to not overwhelm clients and listeners with too much. I think we already have too much information, and I feel we have now started to evolve from a data overwhelmed society to call it like a data insight society where you're just getting what you need, without getting too much. So it's an
Great.
interesting time we're at.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so let's talk about that, because I think there are still some many businesses that are facing the conundrum of, definitely not a lack of data, but too much of it, and not quite to that insights stage. Although, I think I agree. I think we're heading there. But, with the overwhelm of too much data that some companies have, it's hard to know where to start, right? So as background, and you gave a little bit of it as we started, but how did we get to this place where we used to be talking about, well, big data is the answer to everything. Now we have too much, and now we don't know what to do with it. How would you describe that change?
That's a question I've pondered myself, Greg, and I've thought, what seems to happen, in our industry is every 5 years or 10 years, there's something new, right? That pops, and investors are pushing it, the market is pushing it. There's just a lot of dollars that flow into that space, for innovation or whatever you want to call it. And then because a lot of marketing dollars flows there, everyone starts to talk about it, right? Like media starts to talk about it. Companies start to acquire, assets that are aligned with that new capability. Customers start to ask it, and so you begin to. I feel like you fear, or you could fall into the trap of fear of missing out, FOMO,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right.
And so as I think about like big data, right? About 10 years ago, everyone was talking about it. All the data, geeks like us, got super excited, right? And then we wanted our companies to be using, the latest and greatest, there. And, you read the literature, you read the news, that's what was on the news. Those were the companies that
Right.
were going public. Investors were putting dollars into that, right? The press was writing about it. And then, yes, there was merit, like, don't get me wrong, there's huge value, in using specific aspects of big data. But companies started to buy it. You started to amass data. You have cloud. And you didn't have the constraint of like buying a server. You could pay as you go. And
Right.
so you over time started to amass a lot. And then you now have this problem of too much data. And now at the moment, as we speak, there's just a lot of talk about generative AI, right, and AI. And you have Microsoft and Google pushing that. You have media talking about it. You have clients, like our clients, ask us that question. Investors ask that question. And then if you do not have a handle on that question, if you are not working on that capability, or you don't have a point of view on that capability, you could get left behind.
Right.
And so, but that doesn't mean like, so there's a few facets here, right? You obviously want to be on top, and you want to be able to have a educated, thoughtful point of view on how to utilize it to add value, but you don't want to overdo it. And so I worry that, in this rush to get on the next bandwagon, if you may, you sometimes may not have a thoughtful point of view on the value that it's going to add to your end users. And you might just, and yes, I do understand you want to experiment, but you might end up getting too much of it. So like the topic about AI, and this is a very interesting question, Greg, that we can have a debate about it, right? It's like, okay, I think AI helps us parse through all of this massive data, and create insights. I don't need to get a whole page. When I search for like weather in Boston, I don't need to browse through the whole page, on my browser. It's just like, what's the temperature now today? That's
Right.
all I care for.
Yeah.
So I do think like some of the current techniques are too much. And that's one pointed use case, but then there are certain use cases where you might want to discover, and so I think like really thinking through this a bit more, and understanding what you have at your disposal and how you utilize it allows you to maximize the new items that are coming to your plate without jumping on the bandwagon and realizing like 2 3 years out that maybe you got too much or you didn't really utilize it well. So, but long story short, I think it's like maybe that's what the how the industry has always operated. Every 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years, there's something new, and the whole industry, everyone from like the investors to Wall Street to media to like the big buyers and conferences and even the big companies, they're trying to sell something new, and so they're pushing, and you may end up getting too much of it. That may
Yeah.
be why I don't know. I'm curious. What do you think, Greg, about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I want to talk a little bit more about AI in a minute as well, but I think that there are definitely are every so often there is, and probably 5 years is about right. There's a change, there's a major kind of leap forward, or just something new that comes into being. I think AI is certainly that. It's just given the not only the buzz around it, but the actual things that are getting done. Like, not to go on too too much of a tangent, but I think there was a lot of buzz around metaverse, but not a lot of action around it. I think with AI, there's a lot of activity and real business opportunity there as well. But I do think that there's a lot of companies that are certainly they're looking forward to AI, but they're also looking backwards. They made all these investments in big data, and so now they're flush with data, but to kind of go back to the earlier point, don't really know what to do with it. And I guess I just wonder from your perspective, you work with a lot of clients, and I know this from my own work is every business is a little bit different, but there's also some trends and some similarities. Are there any trends or common threads where these organizations that have all this data, what's the mindset, or what's the frame of mind they should use as they try to prioritize where to look, or what data to use, or possibly even discard?
I mean, that's a fair question, and I'll actually maybe give a example of something that's running in our mind at the
Yeah.
moment. So we have collected we have a huge amount of data, and it's a diverse set of data, that we have, and it's on the cloud, right? And I noted that the cloud makes it easy for you to collect and store data because you're paying in pieces versus 10 years ago, you had to buy a server, and manage that 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
And so in my mind, you might have been amassing years and years of data, right? You might have hundreds of dimensions that you're storing, and you might have reports, like thousands of reports that are running in your BI applications externally or internally. The question is, what are you using 80% of the time or 90% of the time? And if you closely look, you might realize that you have a lot of outliers. You have maybe a subset, of data. So it might be like you're only paying attention to what's happening over the last 2 years or 3 years, right? You might only be paying attention to your certain KPIs, and the KPIs have been generated using maybe 20 dimensions out of the thousand you have. And so I think starting to look at what you are using broadly allows you to see what are outliers. And now I'm sure there's going to be folks in your organization that say, oh yeah, I use that report once every year, or once every 2 years, or there might be one person who needs one field, right? And so I'm making a hard decision and saying, how important is that, right?
Right.
Can you
Right.
answer that question in a different way? allows you to decide, how you can trim. And that's kind of the same methodology we've used. We've collected all this data, and we've just said, we're not going to use this, and so it might just be something we stop. But that's a framework, and I can't be representative, but that's a framework that I've seen us and clients use. Now the second part is like, okay, what do you really, how do you monetize, right? I think, in terms of monetization, I always find that, building trends, across time, across industries, across segments is interesting or insightful. So for example, if you're working in the apparel space, right, you are Nike, you would find consumer insights on shoes as well as what your peers are doing, what I call it the top players and the emerging players trying to be insightful, because you're trying to learn best practices of your peers and you're trying to learn what the newcomers, that are winning are doing. And so I think that's a great way to monetize data. So if you have a lot of data, you have external data sets that you buy or are using. So marrying disparate data sets and creating trends on important KPIs for your category or for your geography or for your industry is a way to maximize, what you've done. I think, at the highest level, and your KPI will obviously depend on the industry.
Right.
And then, as I even think forward, I always think about four types of analytics, that you can create with data. One is retrospective, what happened; descriptive, why it happened; predictive, if you don't make any changes, here's what's going to happen; and the fourth is prescriptive, which is, if you make this change or if you do something else, here's what, will happen, or here's a way that you can prescribe an outcome by making these changes. And so I always feel like, it's these four questions you're trying to answer, irrespective of technology. Whether you're like doing this 20 years ago or whether you're doing it maybe a few years out. And so as I look to the future, I think having access to talent, having access to tools, as well as the mindset to be able to answer these questions quickly, cost effectively, in an unbiased way will be important. And I think that's the highest level I can describe. But then again, based on the industry, in our case, we do a lot of work in digital marketing. We are looking across industries. We do a lot of work in retail. So you might be like, okay, how should I be pricing my products going into the summer and into like the next holiday season? How much should I be stocking, given the macro conditions?
Wouldn't it be great if you could ask your data anything at any time? Like, how are sales this quarter? How's the new marketing campaign performing? What does the overall health of the company look like? And actually get answers right away with charts and graphics and actionable information. You can with Domo's AI and data products platform. Domo lets you channel AI and data quickly, securely, and innovatively to deliver measurable insights wherever and whenever you need them. Anyone on your team can use Domo to easily prepare, analyze, visualize, automate, and distribute data, all amplified by AI. Domo goes beyond productivity. It's designed to transform your processes, helping you make smarter and faster decisions and drive real growth. All powered by Domo's trust, flexibility, and years of expertise in data and AI innovation. The world's best companies rely on Domo to make smarter decisions. See how Domo can help transform yours. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com.
Before we continue, I'd like to introduce you to a sponsor of the show, Partner Hero. Customer service outsourcing has long been available mainly to large enterprise businesses with long-term contracts and onerous procurement processes. Partner Hero is challenging business as usual and bringing the benefits of outsourcing to small and medium businesses as well as startups. With short, flexible contracts and fast ramp-up times, Partner Hero is making customer support outsourcing a viable option for small and medium businesses and startups. It's perfect for companies with seasonality expecting a temporary spike in volume or that simply need to scale up. And their focus on quality means your customers will get an experience that feels like it comes from your team. If you're ready to bring in outside customer support help for your company that feels like it's part of your existing team, check out Partner Hero. Head on over to partnerhero.com/agile, that's partnerhero.com/AGILE, to book a free consultation with their solutions team. Mention you heard about Partner Hero from the Agile brand and they'll waive the setup fee. Now let's get back to the show. You mentioned access to the data and everything, and so I wonder there, there's the concept of the citizen data scientist, and what are your thoughts there with the with the companies that you work with? Certainly I think there's always going to need to be the traditional data scientists and the engineers behind that are connecting data sources and doing all those kinds of things, but where do you see the citizen data scientists in the years ahead?
Yeah, that's a very fascinating topic, Greg. I went to like the Museum of Science, in Boston about 2 3 weeks ago, and there was a show in the Museum of Science that talked about ethics and AI and this type of a role. And I thought it was fascinating. I've been thinking about this, and my view is, data in, data out, right? If your input data is biased, then your output is going to be biased.
Yeah.
And so my point of view is, it's really like the ones with the dollar that have generated data, right? If you think about it, right, it's like the largest companies, the ones with the most capital. It's individuals, we as consumers with the most amount of capital. It's countries with the most capital. It's sections of the United States with the most amount of capital that have devices, that can buy servers, that can buy cloud, that have generated data, right? I'm sure, if there's a map of the world that is like, imagine like, red as the most dense data and, like faint as the least dense data, I'm sure, you would be able to see where data is generated the most. Right. So what does that do, right? I think what that does is, if you're flowing, this data to the algorithms, then obviously the algorithm will be biased. You might have a self-driving car. And the example that I saw in this Museum of Science experiment was, the self-driving cars were biased, such that if you were of a certain skin color, and it was a hazy day, then it was likely for the self-driving car to hit you, versus if you are of a certain skin color. So I thought that was fascinating, the way that was portrayed. And so what does that mean, right? It's like, if you have certain data sets that are biasing your model, then your output will be biased. And hence, I think, having a very, you call it like a citizen data scientist, I think it's having diversity in thinking. It's having folks, again, based on the industry, obviously, making sure that you have people who are underrepresented, in with a voice on the table, who are in fact pushing back. It's ensuring that you're normalizing your data sets to the sample, and what I know, it's not going to be perfect, and I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, and hence, a wide representation of human individuals, or someone who has that mindset, who's at the table, who has a voice, who can even veto, allows models or AI or data science in the future to do a better job and not bias us. That's my point of view, Greg.
No, that's I appreciate that. And so one last thing I wanted to touch on today. Again, we're working with the organizations that you work with. They may be flooded with data, they may not, but either way, just wondering, are there areas where you get a lot of requests, perhaps in certain areas, but are there areas where companies should be looking that they often don't, when it comes to data, that many companies may not be really capitalizing on? Do you see anything there?
Yeah, yeah. So the way I answer that question is, yeah, I have found that, a lot of it's called like dark data, which is sometimes like server logs, usage logs, all of these signals are insightful. Correlating these other data sets that might remain in your universe of data and correlating that with like the core data in the data warehouses always creates something new. So for example, you might marry usage data with something else. That's one
Yeah.
piece. The second
Yeah.
piece I did want to say is, not all knowledge is codified, right? And so, there is a lot of data in my mind is knowledge. And so you do have access to data that your team members have, right? Which may not be structured, or stored in a manner that's easily accessible. And so as you think about kind of the future and kind of how you use data, I would I would be ensuring like I would be cataloging all data that I have, like I mean hard data. So I was noting, like, I just came up with like the server logs or usage logs as an example.
Yeah.
Usage logs generally you use, but like it could be server logs. But then I think I also want to emphasize that there's a lot of knowledge, that folks have. It could be, it might be on like pictures, on emails, or it could be on social media. Again, these are areas that you already have, but it's like also conversations, voice like podcasts, videos. More and more people are kind of generating these, as well as like sometimes just having a conversation, with diverse groups within your company, those that are at the forefront, those that are on support, and using that creates a new wealth. Because I've always found, like in my experience when I work, my data set says something. But when I have a conversation with a client or someone on the front line or someone like on the background, I always learn something new. So I think it's balancing that. And, when we talk about data, and even I may lose sight of that, being a data scientist, I might lose sight that, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of data that is still embedded in the human brain, that might not have been codified. I think that's the way I would think about this, Greg.
Yeah.
What's your point of view on this? Just curious on this.
Yeah, no, I agreed with your points. I mean, I think it is hard to kind of reconcile the easily quantified with the more difficult to quantify. So I, definitely, it's not easy without starting to get into what I would call anecdotal things, which are, just kind of outsized. They have outsized influence on outcomes when they may or may not be as important. So it's a challenge. I mean, I certainly I asked the question because I'm also searching for answers too. I think it's there's I've worked with organizations to do prioritization exercises of, well, okay, if we could, cost notwithstanding even, or if we could, regardless of what it took to do something, what would we want to be able to see and what would we want to be able to quantify? And, sometimes some interesting things happen when you kind of take some of the practicalities, or, you stop thinking about how complicated something may be, because often also non-engineers and non-data scientists might think that some things are harder to do than they might actually be. So, just kind of taking the practicalities out of it for a little bit, just to kind of do a thought experiment, I think can often help there.
Yep. Yeah.
Great. Well, Prasanna, thank you so much for joining the show. One last question before we wrap up. You've given a lot of great insights already, but for those businesses that know they need to get smarter in the way they're using their data, but maybe not sure where to start, what's one piece of advice you'd have for them in the months ahead?
I think for just stating that this is important and making that a charter of the company or slash the goal, and letting everyone know that we are going to be using data insights to drive decisions, and that might sound cliche, but just stating that out loud or making like a piece of that, your public charter, increases the importance of that. Second is, I think, it's, again, really understanding what you have, as we discussed, your different types of data sets internally, externally, and cataloging that, creating a diverse team, of data scientists and atypical data scientists, across disciplines. So many, even thinking about business models about is another one. And then the final thing I do say is there's a lot of, value you can get by on monetizing. So thinking about new business models on monetizing. So traditional, you might think that, oh, I'm going to increase efficiency by loading it on my BI, or if you're a SaaS company, you might be like, oh, I'm going to create a subscription business. That alone isn't the only business model. There's a lot of business models you can generate by content, right? So you can create benchmarks, you can create impactful reports, and then so there's a whole business model on content. And then finally there's new models that you may be able to generate with service. So you have access to this data, and maybe there's a new way that you can offer service, that reduces time, reduces cost, delights customers. So there's a lot of business model innovation that's also possible. So as you think about kind of maximizing the data possibilities in the world ahead, I think having a diverse point of view, and then finally looking at ways that you can monetize it to create new business models is what I would encourage folks to think about.
Great, great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Prasanna Dhungel, managing partner at GrowByData, for joining the show. You can learn more about Prasanna and GrowByData by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.